Okay, so welcome everybody. It's great to see you all. And without any further ado, I will hand over to our Chamber President, Colin Ahern, to get the ball rolling. Over to you, Colin.
Thanks, John. I'd also like to welcome everyone to our Chamber Chat today. As you know, our Chamber Chats are a way for us to meet and network with each other, albeit with the restrictions at the moment. And for the next short while, we need to do it through a virtual platform such as this. Our Chamber Chats are also an opportunity for us to hear and learn about important issues and things that are happening in our wider business community. 2020 has brought with it several triumphs. COVID-19 has forced companies to create remote workforces and operate off cloud-based platforms. And in this new environment, the safety of our devices and how we use them has come under scrutiny, and the cybersecurity industry has become even more important than ever. By way of illustration, consider the following few facts. 95% of cybersecurity breaches are caused by human error. The worldwide information security market is forecast to reach 170 billion in 2022. 88% of organizations worldwide experienced spear phishing attempts in 2019. 68% of business leaders feel their cybersecurity risks are increasing. And on average, only 5% of companies' folders are properly protected. Scary statistics indeed, and I, for one, am looking forward to hearing from our expert speaker on this topic on what small businesses can do about it. I will now hand you back to John to introduce our speaker to you.
Thank you, Colin. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, who is Laurence Conroy, Senior Operations Manager at Security Risk Advisors. Just a little bit about the company. Security Risk Advisors, or SRA for short, is a computer and network security company providing cybersecurity consulting and managed security services to Fortune 1000 United States, multinational, international, and large non-profit organizations. Founded in 2010, they're headquartered in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA, and they established their European headquarters and Security Operations Center, SOC, in Kilkenny in 2019. So we're delighted to have their Senior Operations Manager, Laurence Conroy, present to us today. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand over now to Lar. And as Lar is speaking, I will share the screens. So Lar, you just don't be shy about telling me when to move forward and whatever as we go along. Over to you,
Sure.
Lar.
Thank you very much, John, and thanks for framing that for us, Colin. Definitely could do with you and my team. You've done your research. Thank you. As I said, I'm Laurence Conroy, and I'm a chartered engineer with 30 years experience in building and leading technical teams. I've had the privilege of working at SRA for over 2 years now, and I have 4 years management experience at a previous cybersecurity service provider. My role is to coordinate the day-to-day operations of the Ireland office and work with my US colleagues to ensure that operations are appropriate, efficient, and effective. So what's important for me to sort of try get across to the group today is that I'm not here to pitch SRA as a service. I wouldn't think that we would be an appropriate fit for a lot of the people's setup. But what I do want to try, I want people to walk away with the impression that there's plenty you can do to improve your cyber readiness. There's a lot of no-cost, low-cost solutions out there. And you know, I don't want to have one of these presentations where somebody from cybersecurity gets up and tells a whole load of war stories or a load of scare stories, and then people sort of leave bamboozled and not knowing what way to go. So I'd love at the end of this for people to have some actionable items. If we could just sort of kick on there to the agenda, this is what we're going to talk about today. A little bit about cybersecurity, a little bit about SRA as, you know, as a service provider and what service providers like what we do, who our adversaries are, who would be interested in, you know, individual users that are out there. You know, a lot of people rely on, you know, security by anonymity, which doesn't always work. I want to explain how we sort of approach the three basic constituencies in cybersecurity, and then we'll wrap up then with a bit of Q&A. If we could just kick on to the next slide there. So cybersecurity, or more formally as it's known, information or data security, refers to, here's the sort of a dry analysis. It refers to the body of technologies, processes and practices that are designed to protect networks and data from attack or unauthorized access. So basically it's to stop people getting at our data. Cyber is a very nice, useful, convenient prefix. You know, you can stick it onto everything to try and make it sound interesting. A fun fact is the first use of the word cybersecurity as a word dates back to 1989. And its root is in the late 1940s concept of cybernetics, which was the study of control systems and communications between people and machines. So just looking at this slide here, a lot of security consultancies like SRA, or some people call us managed service providers, security service providers, MSSPs, they break down into sort of basically two sides of the house. We've got the red team, which is what we refer to as offensive security on one side and blue team on the other. There's also a purple team, but we probably don't have the time to get into that today, but just to let you know it exists, and it's sort of like a development and enhancement on the current model. The red team, they would be charged with ethical hacking, exploiting vulnerabilities. And when I say ethical hacking, that is getting permission from a client company to try and attempt to breach the security defenses. Because, as we all know, it's illegal to do that unless you get a signed contract to go ahead and perform those penetration tests. They do black box testing, social engineering, and web app scanning. On the other side, we have the folks that are on the watchtower, and that's the team, part of the team, the overall SOC team that live and work out of Kilkenny. We're in that blue team, and we provide what's called defensive security. So we protect the infrastructure. We work on damage control, incident response. If something happens, how we follow up and remediate and mitigate those threats. Operational security. So, you know, you've got information security and you've got information technology. Well, operational security refers to, you know, the cyber security relating to sort of machinery, industrial processes, SCADA networks and the like. On our time, we've got threat hunters and we perform digital forensics. If we could just kick on to the next slide there, please. So this is just a little bit about SRA. As John said, founded in 2010, began as a boutique consultancy. So by boutique, you can read very specialized and very expensive. We've scaled up an awful lot since then, and we keep having to sort of readjust our operating model to deal with that growth in scale. We maintain a fully staffed leading edge security operations center, again, on the blue side of the house. Kilkenny is SRA's first international office outside the United States, enabling the company to provide better follow the sun 24/7, 365 to monitor client systems. We're actually looking at more overseas operations centers, they're in planning at the moment. In particular, Hawaii. We've got a lot of applications for the Hawaii office, and we're also looking at New Zealand and Australia. Yep, you can just see the way our services break down there. And as I say, we like to mix things up. So the red team is labeled in blue and the blue team's labeled in red. That's just to see if anybody was paying attention. If you could just go to the next slide, please. So where do you start talking about a broad subject like cybersecurity? I think probably the best way to do it is to sort of look and figure out who's out there that's looking to have a go. They break down into a couple of broad categories, and we'll start with script kiddies. These people use existing computer scripts or code to launch attacks. Their motivations vary. Script kiddies typically have very little expertise or sophistication and very little funding. The thing about script kiddies is that they don't sort of write their own code. There's a lot of very powerful tools out there on the internet. A lot of these tools, in fact, almost all of them are designed with a legitimate purpose in mind. And of course, you know, people can weaponize tools. You know, you could say take a hammer or a drill, to fix something or build something, but you can also use to break in somewhere as well. So these people sort of use existing tools out there to have a bit of crack and get up to some mischief. The problem with script kiddies is they tend not to be very good at covering their tracks, and quite a few of them end up in jail, which is unfortunate for them. The other threat is the insider threat. These people have legitimate access to an organization's internal resources, and they tend to be driven by greed, or they want to exact revenge on the organization for if they feel hard done by something, you know. And these people are very have very powerful access and can cause an awful lot of harm. So there's, like, in big organizations would have an awful lot of sort of tools and processes to try and sort of lessen that risk there. We also have hacktivists. So these people would launch attacks as part of an activist movement or to further a cause. And it tends not to be for their own personal gain or benefit. And again, for the likes of hacktivists and other threat actors or bad actors, they have access to tools. And also, you've heard of software as a service. Well, cybercrime as a service exists. They can actually outsource the skullduggery to companies who sort of do this work for them and get paid. So you'll often see that sort of hacktivists will sort of have a go at, say, certain websites or vandalized political websites, or other causes that are near and dear to their heart. Then we have what we call nation states, or APT, which stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. And I'll try not to sort of kill everybody with acronyms and jargon today. I'll try sort of do plain English as we go along. These would be sponsored by a nation state or government, and typically would be a military intelligence unit or contractors, if they want to add like a little bit of a layer there to be able to give a bit of plausible deniability or distance themselves from their carry on. An advanced persistent threat is a targeted attack against an enterprise network or a country, and it tends to remain undetected for an extended period of time. You know, it costs an awful lot of money to infiltrate big secure networks like governments or large enterprises. And it costs an awful lot of money to, you know, keep that persistence to remain in there and remain undetected. So there's an awful lot of resources go into this. Like, I mean, one story is we had a large client facility that was was under attack for a sustained period of time. And you would imagine, you know, that these attacks are like smash and grab, but these attacks can be brute force where they kick in the door, or quite often, like a cyber attack would be maintained for a very long period of time. When people know they're there, it's just hard to get them out, and it could take a year to kick somebody out of a network. But with our client facility, we were under sustained attack. We were dealing with the incident response, and then all of a sudden it stopped. It turned out to have stopped at 5 p.m. Moscow time, and then the attack resumed at 9 a.m. Moscow time. So these are people that go to work and go home and have their tea as well. Like I say, it's a business and it's very structured. But the APT would be a targeted attack against an enterprise network or a country, and tends to remain, as I say, undetected. They've got significant resources, funding and capability, and they can launch very sophisticated attacks. And their goals are political, or they're military. You know, they may want to disrupt a political election. You know, we've seen interference in the US 2016, and there's alleged interference with the UK Brexit vote as well. So, you know, there's a lot of vested interests there. And then we get on to organized crime. And I've just highlighted the scammers because these guys tend to be the chief adversary of the individual and the small business. And these are criminal enterprises that employ teams of fraudsters with the intention of stealing your money. It's run like a call center, and they use call center hardware, and they use call center processes and software. They have teams that come in the morning and they get their cup of coffee and they have their cigarette, and then they sit down and put on their headset like this, and they get their stack of calls. It would be information that would be harvested or sold to them. You know, maybe somebody would have clicked on something earlier on to highlight themselves as a sort of a naive user, and all that information gets harvested. It gets put into the stack and they put in their calls. As I say, it's run like a call center, and there's a tiered structure comprising of managers and workers, and they typically operate from countries where authorities turn a blind eye to their activities. And they either talk you into sending the money, they're very good, they've the gift of the gab, or they talk you into giving them your account access, or they talk you into installing bad software on your PC that gives them access. Inevitably, it's the end user that gives the goods away. If you want to just kick on to the next slide there, Won't dwell on this for anything too long, but this is a good example. You could say, like, I'm little old Mr. Individual me. I don't run a big company. I'm not important. Why would anyone be interested? Well, like a PC with access to the internet alone can be monetized and used in several different ways, you know, like, and I'm not going to go down through all of these, but, you know, apart from stealing the information that's on it or using them to launch attacks. A lot of devices with internet access, including IoT, you know, the Internet of Things, your security cameras and DVRs and things that are internet enabled, can all be recruited to become part of what's called a bot army. It sounds very dramatic, but it's quite common. And what these devices are used to actually gang up and launch an attack against certain servers or certain firewalls somewhere. And how they do that is that they put in loads and loads of requests for access, which causes the device to fall over from being overwhelmed with the amount of requests. So they're called sort of zombie machines, and all of this stuff with idle interconnections can be recruited. So that's just one example of what a hacked PC can do. If you want to kick on to the next slide there. So listen, enough about what's bad out there, but what can we do? Well, as individuals, and as I say, there's three constituencies we want to look at here in terms of how we approach cybersecurity. One is the individual user. Number two is the small business, and number three is the big enterprise, the big company with the deep pockets and the big purse. The one common factor through all of these three constituencies is the individual user, okay? So from the person in the street that's operating from home, that same person could be sitting in your office in a small to medium enterprise. That same person is sitting in a large enterprise, and the same rules apply. Stay educated on the latest scams and tricks and the tactics that are being used by these bad actors. Two-factor authentication, very, very powerful. It provides another layer of security on top of the login credentials alone. And you should always use this when provided. So a lot of your social media accounts will give you the facility to have that two-factor where, you know, you put in your password and then you get a code on your phone and you put in that code. That's super powerful. It just takes like a couple of extra seconds, but it can cut out a huge amount of risk factor for you. So implement that wherever it's available. A lot of people, there's a lot of accounts out there, and a lot of them require passwords, and a lot of them require complicated passwords, and you end up writing them down, and they end up on yellow post-it notes. And sometimes you're tempted to use the same password over and over, and if you get compromised in one, the bad guys know that people do this. They exploit human nature, and they know you've used the same password, so they'll try it on everything. You know, your LinkedIn, your Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever. You know, so you've got to try and mix up your passwords. A password manager out there like LastPass or KeePass, you know, you can do the homework there, find them. They'll manage all your passwords for you, and you just need to know the password to your password manager, and it will remember all the other ones for you, and they tend to be very secure. So look that up. That's very, very useful. In terms of passwords, try to stay away from the simple passwords, because again, I mentioned these tools that are out there. You know, anyone can come along and launch a dictionary attack. So it's a program, and I can set it up on my machine, and I can point it at your machine, and the program that will launch a dictionary attack against you, the passwords on your machine or your network, and it'll run through thousands, hundreds of thousands of them over the day. It'll keep trying all the obvious ones until it gets a hit. So you need to mix it up. What's really good is a passphrase. So if you sort of come up with something like you know, some series of words that's familiar with, a line from a song or a poem, no spaces between them, the odd capital letter here and there, change the odd like O for a 0 or the odd I for a 1, and that'll add really enhanced protection to your passwords. Never share your passwords, obviously. Be cautious of what you post online, because have you ever rang the bank and they say, right, we want to check it's you and we want to know what your security questions. So if one of your security questions is, what's your favorite sports team? And you have up on Facebook that you're delighted Leinster won at the weekend. Or another one is where you were born. And then you're posting all these pictures from where you were born. So, you know, you're giving away the goods there. You're telling these guys what the answers to all your security questions are. So to be aware of that. I know it sounds like it's zero crack here, Lar, but it's up to you to take the advice and use it if you want. Again, you know, going on holidays, your location, it's a great source of intel for social engineering. And I'll tell you what social engineering is in a little bit. Another tip is don't access sensitive information while using public Wi-Fi, unless you actually have a VPN. And a VPN is a little service you pay for. It encrypts all your connections to the internet. Great tip. Take on a VPN if you can. It's virtual private network is what that stands for. But if you're on a public network, there's no guarantee that that public network is secure. So I would not be suggest that you do any online banking or do any password sharing or anything that's sensitive at all on a public network, like a shopping center, train station, airport, something like that. It's fine for a bit of browsing. It's fine for catching up on news and stuff like that, but don't do anything that you wouldn't want to share with a complete stranger. And that public Wi-Fi piece comes into improving, just keeping an eye on our time there. So listen, a lot of what affects people and small businesses are the hackers, the scammers that I mentioned earlier. So so if you get an email that comes in, never enter your username or enter your password after clicking on a link or an email. Do not open attachments that you were not expecting. You know, you should only ever open an attachment if you know that a colleague in your office is sending it to you, or if a business associate says, I will send you that spreadsheet. But if something else comes in and you're not expecting it, into the deleted folder, off it goes, don't open it. Especially ones that that have extensions like .zip, which can, once you unzip it, you click it, it'll unzip it and deploy the software on your machine, or exe, which is an executable. Be extremely wary of unexpected phone calls. And again, these are the scammers that ring you up and say, hello, you actually signed up, you don't know this, but you signed up for this really expensive service a couple of years ago, and we've closed the service and you've got a refund coming. So we all know there's no such thing as a free lunch. And what they'll do is they'll say, yeah, we're going to send you all this money. We sent you too much, you got to send some back. Then you're in the net, and then, you know, bank details are all exposed, and then you've ended up and they end up clearing you out. The other thing they do is they appeal to your human nature in terms of a sense of panic. So, you know, you're going to lose something, you need to do something quickly, and you need to go to this website quickly. If you ever feel you've been put under pressure in a phone call, absolute scam, forget it. That's what they do. They're leveraging pressure. If anyone's ever asking you for access to sensitive data, forget it. It's a scam. Legitimate organizations won't ask for it. A lot of tools out there that are free. They come with your machine. If you've got a Windows machine, you've got Defender on it. That's a super powerful tool. Windows has spent millions developing this, and they put it on your machine. You should use it. It's been really, really enhanced over the years. Also, what's wrong in paying a few quid for an updated antivirus? You know, it's a lot cheaper in the long run, and it beats having to pay the costs of a breach or an attack. Regularly update your software. Again, when software is written, the coders do a fantastic job, but they'll never write code that is 100% secure out the gate. So what happens is, over the years, they discover vulnerabilities. They're called 0 days. Hackers love them because it sort of leaves a security vulnerability in a system, and it allows them to exploit it. So always update your software. You know, the applications that are sitting on your machine, word processors, PDFs, all that sort of stuff, because what those patches are doing is that they're patching a hole. An important thing, again, for the individual and the small business is back up your data. So a common attack in recent years is ransomware. And I mentioned at the top of the call that there's a lot of legitimate tools out there. So for GDPR and other reasons, we're encrypting. We're using powerful encryption tools that will encrypt your data. And that's one of the conditions of the GDPR, is that you make stuff anonymized, that people can't read it. But what if somebody gets access to your system and they turn that around and they encrypt all your data and your folders, and they say, okay, Lar, if you want to get access to your stuff, that's going to cost you 300 euros. And, you know, depending on who their victim is and how deep they think their pockets are, that ransom can go up. If it's a large corporation, it could be $1 million. So the way to protect yourself against that is always back up your data. It doesn't cost anything to get a small external hard drive, put it in your Outlook calendar, backup, you know, Friday evening, I'm going to back up everything. And then if you do get ransomware, also back up your license keys, so that if you have to reinstall your software, you've got your license key ready to go. And what happens is somebody ransomwares you and you can pay the ransom, that's fine. They're very polite. They'll give you, telephone numbers to ring them for assistance, and they'll give you guides and they'll say please and thank you. And once you've paid your money, and more times often than not, they'll actually let you unlock your system. Sometimes they won't, out of badness. But if you want, you can flatten your PC, you can wipe it and reinstall everything, which is what to do at enterprise level. So I spent a long time on that slide. John, if you want to kick on there. Okay, now this would be enterprise defense framework. So this is one of the 3 constituents of cybersecurity. This would be a large company, how they would approach cybersecurity. This particular slide you're looking at is Security Risk Advisors' overall approach to the holistic security posture of a large enterprise. And as you can see, there's a lot there. I'm not going to go, you'll thank me, I won't go through every single thing on that, but that's our H24, our honeycomb. And each of those particular tiles in there, they fall under the pillars of governance, programs, and operations. If you just look on the right-hand side under operations, you'll see CyberSOC. So it's one of many tiles. So the team of 35 engineers and analysts that are working in Kilkenny, the team of 35 represent 25% of that CyberSOC tile in SRA. So there's a whole load to consider here for the Chief Information Security Officer in the large enterprise. They've got a lot on their plate. There's all these different aspects of security, and each of those tiles could have, in-house security team dealing with it. You could outsource it to a service provider, and each of those 5 tiles has 5 different levels of maturity. So, for a big enterprise, it's a lot of money and it's a lot of time and it's a lot of people work. And if you want to just kick on to the next slide there, John. So, particular challenges facing the small business. You can see in the image there, no IT department, less likely to follow best practices. I'm not saying that about everybody on the call here today. Simple networks and systems that are easy to get access and exploit. Using the cloud. Cloud is a double-edged sword. It can be fantastically secure if you set it up correctly, and if you don't set it up correctly, you're leaving yourself exposed. Using third-party software, big data moving around, GDPR obligations, and being an easy target. So who's our number one enemy? Our number one enemy is us, poorly trained users. So if you wouldn't mind, John, can we run the poll there now for people?
Sure, I'm just going to put up the poll now. And it's a simple question, looking for a yes or no answer, and it'll give us an opportunity to get a bit of feedback really from everybody on the call as to how you feel your business is performing in this space. So so I'm just going to leave it open there just for a couple of seconds and give you a chance to answer it. And yeah, the way it's going now, we're getting both yes and no answers, which is perfectly expectable. It's running 30 seconds now, so I'll just leave it go for another few seconds and give a few more people a chance to get in there. Okay, I'll end it there now after 40 seconds, and we can see that the majority have answered no. Is that coming up there in front of you, Lara?
No, but I'll take your word for it, John.
Okay, well, hold on. I have a button here to share the results.
Yes,
now can you
absolutely. See it? Okay, well, that's good. Like, I mean, it's good that people have, have taken what they consider to be adequate management of their situation. And if you say no, well, then you've come to the right place, because as I said from the top, there are a lot of low cost, no cost things you can do to improve your security posture by 70, 80, 90%. So just looking at this, like it's the user, we've covered in the previous slide the many different attack vectors, as we're wont to say in this business. So training is something that people can do. You can set aside training regularly some morning every week where people are trained on the best practices in your business. Malware, of course, malware is a sort of a catch-all term for sort of bad software that that people want to get on your system and exploit you, and that includes spyware, ransomware, viruses, worms. We won't go through it, but there's tons out there keeping us in business. A particular threat and danger to the small business is the man-in-the-middle attack. So this is also known as an eavesdropping attack, and this occurs when attackers insert themselves into a two-party transaction. Once the attacker interrupts the traffic, they can actually steal data, access credentials, and they can manipulate financial transactions between companies and their suppliers. For example, like you could have taken receipt of a couple of pallets of goods. Your supplier says, you know, when are you paying me? Oh, by the way, I've changed from one bank to another bank. My new bank is in the Bahamas, and you go, that's fine, and you send the money to the Bahamas, and then your actual supplier comes along and goes, I'm still waiting for that payment. So the man in the middle is very common. It happens to a lot of small businesses, and a lot of times the damage from an attack can range from, you know, damage to your system that you actually have to, repair, systems. Costs can come from downtime where you're not able to do business. That can happen several big processing plants, and costs can also come in terms of reputational damage. A lot of small companies, when this happens, and they won't tell people because they're afraid that it will affect the confidence that the people working with them will have. So man in the middle is something that's quite important, and you need to be sort of mindful of. One of the access points for man in the middle is if a company has an access point, Wi-Fi access point in their office, and it's not secured properly or hidden from outsiders. That's one of the easiest ways to get in. If you want to no, you're okay. Actually, no, we just go back there for a second. Sorry. Yeah. Social engineering is what relies on human emotion to gain unauthorized network access. And I mentioned that earlier. It's the scammers. It's the people send you that email for you to click on a link. So phishing would be it's a fraudulent communication that appears to come from a reputable source, and it's usually through email. And the trick is to get you to click on a message that leads you somewhere that you will give away your password and so on. Spear phishing is a variation on that, and it's highly targeted and it's much more sophisticated. So spear phishing scammers conduct in-depth research about their victims. So they'll go on, say, a manager's Facebook page, and they'll shape and create a very targeted communication to them. Like, I mean, hey, John, I see you got a hole-in-one at the golf last week. Great, I hope you had a good time. And here's a picture I got of you and the lads in the bar afterwards. And you click on the picture and away you go, you're in bother. And then there's the scammers who I mentioned earlier. So what I would say about the scammers is that, as I said, they appeal to your sense of greed or panic. No such thing as a free lunch. No service provider will ever ask you for these details. Irish people are too polite and trusting, so just hang up and tell them to go away. And don't answer calls from foreign countries that you're not expecting. It's like that attachment that comes in on the email. If you're not expecting that call from Lithuania, just don't answer it. And if something comes in with no caller ID, you're not going to need to answer that either. The APT, the nation state, which you would think mightn't affect you, they like sort of to get into the supply chain for the bigger companies. So they may use a smaller company that isn't as secure as they should be, and then get into the chain of trust and get access to those bigger companies. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. So if you just go on to the next slide, these are my guidelines for small business. Train your employees in security principles, protect information, computers and networks from cyber attacks. And, again, you don't have to invest heavily. You can just update your to the latest security software, make sure that your web browsing is set to safe mode, do all your patches, run antivirus. The next item is you could look at providing a firewall security for your internet connection. So I know everybody's not made of money, so they're not going to be able to get a big megabucks security consultancy on board. But, if you looked at your budget and you could afford either a software firewall, which is a program, or a hardware firewall, that would be an investment worth making, because the firewall will control and protect and allows you filter all the traffic in and out of your network, even just a single PC. I would advise people to create a mobile device action plan, make backup copies, as I mentioned earlier. Control access to your computers and create user accounts for each employee. So it's bad practice to have everybody have access to everything. So if one person gets compromised, then they can get their hands on all the goodies. So if you, it's a principle of least privilege. Don't give anybody more access than they need to do their job. And that way you can put in these sort of bulkheads through your organization, and it can sort of contain, it can contain the access that a bad actor would have. Secure your Wi-Fi networks. So that would be, again, looking at your setup, making sure you've got it encrypted, make sure it's hidden, turn off the SSID identifier, stuff like that. Employ best practices on payment cards, limit employee access to that information, limit authority to, so don't allow people on their computers in your business to install software. Simple as that. If you need to put a program on it, you'll do it, or your authorized IT provider. But you know, letting people install, download and install stuff is a recipe for disaster, because A, they don't need it for work. B, they could actually download something that's actually spyware, or that's a Trojan horse that looks like something that's free, and all it does is create a backdoor into your network. Or C, it will allow somebody who has access to your machine from remotely install software. So you don't just allow them to install it. And then working on passwords and authentication, have good practices there. Sorry for running over. Questions, anybody?
Sorry, Larry. Yes, I was trying to turn on my microphone there.
I thought you were just stunned with my amazing presentation, John. That's
well,
there
was an element of that too. Absolutely, full of information there, and in easy to understand ordinary English, which is refreshing. Very often experts talk on stuff that's highly technical, and really you have to be another highly technical individual to understand it. But that was super, Larry. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
We have a couple of questions in on the chat box. Sometimes, Lar, you hear that Apple Macs are less susceptible to hacking and that antivirus is not essential as OS X is so strong. Is there any truth in that assertion, or what do you think?
There's an element of truth in it, because most of the malware out there is designed for the Windows system, for the PC system. So it's a percentage game. We do know there is malware that's actually designed for the Apple system as well, the iOS. So I would say, yes, there's less chance of you being compromised, but that's no reason to let your guard down and not have secure practices and policies and processes in place.
Very good, very good. Okay. And another question, what are the immediate steps you should take if you inadvertently click on a link and you then realize you shouldn't have? Is there stuff you can do to undo it, or what's the next step?
So if you click on it, is basically what you need to do is close any of the open windows you have. If you have an antivirus scanner that's up to date, run that. And I would also change all your passwords. So both on your machine and on your various social media accounts.
Very good. Thank you. Good advice, Lard. Thank you. And I would just say to everybody, if you have any questions, please don't be shy. You can certainly use your microphone if you wish. There's not too many on the call, so we'll be able to manage that easily enough, or type it into the chat box if you wish. But I've one for you here, Lar. How much, in terms of money, should a company consider putting aside for their cyber readiness budget?
That's a tough one, because we can't assume that everybody has endless budgets for cybersecurity. I think basically it's a risk-based framework. A company needs to evaluate the risks they face by considering, say, two factors: the likelihood that a specific event will occur, combined with any impact that may event cause. And I mentioned risk was one of the tiles that a big enterprise faces. They will often evaluate all the risks. They will cost all the risks. And then sometimes they'll say, do you know what, to remediate and mitigate and eliminate that risk, it actually costs too much. And it actually costs more than actually the damage, you know, that a compromise on that particular aspect, and they'll accept the risk. So at the top of the call, I was at pains to say that I'm not here to say that everybody needs to spend a lot of money. All the items that I covered will massively increase your security posture, and you should be doing them first. I would also say, like, for small businesses and enterprises, they don't need to come to a big managed security services provider specialists. The general IT providers out there are very well up to speed on all the security aspects, and they can advise you. Like, I mean, as I said, if you have any money to spend, I would look at, apart from having done all the user training, because we do know the user is your number one frenemy. So you're investing time and effort into user training, because that's the number one compromise area. But again, a lot of people would have invested in software and programs that are not even maximizing their potential. Like, I mean, if you go into all your accounts and you go into the privacy, you know, sections of them, there's several tick boxes you can enable there to enhance the security of all your account access. So there are a couple of things, you know, and again, talk to your general IT provider, and, you know, maybe look at, maybe if you were going to invest in one piece of hardware, firewall is very useful, because it does put that protection between you and the external internet.
Very good. Well, thanks very much for that, Lar.
Yeah.
I think we'll start winding down now. I see that we're coming close to the 2 o'clock, and I don't want to keep you on over long. So I'll hand back to our president, Colin Ahern, for a few closing words. If you can take over there, Colin.
Thanks.
Well, thanks, John. Thank you, Lar, for that excellent presentation. And it's great to hear that, in your own words, you work for a Megabucks cybersecurity company. But it was hugely informative and very relevant in today's world. And I would encourage everyone to look at their own businesses and to put into action the excellent advice and direction received from Lar today. Kilkenny Chamber is a supportive and representative organisation for our members. We have a huge and very proactive lobbying voice, and we are using this to guide and influence government and others in all aspects of running the country. Currently, the focus is very much on reopening our businesses, as I'm sure we're all going to hear later on today. And the Chamber has been engaging weekly with the government, seeking timelines for a sustainable reopening, a sustained financial support during that period and after, and support for our towns and cities. Our work in this area is relentless, and we are ensuring that the voice of businesses in Kilkenny is heard loud and clear. Today's Chamber chat is just a small but important part of what we do, and we are always interested in hearing from our members about what else we can do to assist you in these very challenging times. Please also keep an eye on our weekly newsletter for information and updates on future news and events on an ongoing basis. And thank you all for joining us today. Stay safe and continued success in your businesses.